Thanks for tuning into A Better World, where we aim to illustrate that today is the greatest time to be alive and show the progress we're making as a civilization. I'm your host, Luis Acevedo, and in today's show, we'll be going over an article that I read from Human Progress, and the article is titled, When Dogs Were Used as Kitchen Gadgets. Now, the time frame of this story takes place in the 1600s, so way back in the day. And the way they used to cook meat was a lot different than the way we do it now. And what they used to do, as I'm sure you've seen in cartoons and movies, is they would put a steak through an animal, set them over a fire, and then you would turn it occasionally, so that way you get an even cook. So that's the way they used to do it. And there was a job for that, to turn it. And at the time, that position was held by the lowest levels of the kitchen staff because of how exhausting it was and the pain that was involved in it. And unfortunately, those low kitchen staff members were children, small boys, went out there and did this work. Now, they were given a wet bale of hay, so that way they didn't catch on fire or anything like that, but they still got burnt, blisters, and suffered from exhaustion because it is tasking work, and it takes a long time to cook the meat evenly through, especially if you're just hand cranking it over a fire. It apparently takes anywhere from 40 to 80 minutes to cook 1 kilo, which 1 kilo, if I'm not mistaken, is equivalent to 2.2 pounds. So it took anywhere from 40 minutes to 80 minutes to cook 2 pounds of meat. So if you had a big hunk of meat sitting over there over the fire and you're rotating it, it could take several hours to do this work. So these children were doing this work. We look at this nowadays and we think, what the hell was wrong with them? Because I know for a fact I couldn't imagine seeing a child doing that tasking of a work. And I would think, or I would assume, that an adult should do something like that. But that wasn't the case. And so they did move past that. And what they did was create a dog. They bred a dog that would replace the need for child labor in that realm. And so this dog is called the Turnspit. And its job was to do exactly what those children were doing, but the dog was in a hamster wheel. So it was essentially a hamster wheel. And it would rotate the meat, and basically it would just get in there and run continuously until the meat was done. But it wasn't just one dog who would do this, it'd be several because they would take shifts. But while they were doing it, there was no break, there was no water, there was no nothing. And even cooks put hot coals in those hamster wheels so that way it would make the dogs go quicker in hopes that the meat would cook quicker if the dogs started going faster. And so really brutal the way they treated the dogs. They didn't give them any water, they didn't get any breaks other than, when switching shifts and things like that. And it was just really, really gruesome, archaic, and barbaric. However, there was a slight progression there, if I must say. Now, I love dogs as much as the next person, and if you guys see my Instagram or my Facebook, you guys see me taking pictures of my dog almost religiously. I love dogs. I'm a very big dog person. Grew up with them all my life. However, if I'm going back and putting myself in their position, I'm looking at it like this. So my child used to have to go out and do this work. Now, my child used to get hurt from doing this work. But somebody just bred a dog that can do what my child did, and it doesn't have to be paid, and it doesn't have to be fed, and it doesn't have to be watered. You just work it. Well, being that probably 99% of the population was poor at this time and struggling to make ends meet, I would be also a quick adapter if I was back in that time, because that was the latest invention. Not saying it's right, but there was progression. So it went from child labor to animal labor. So there was a step up there. Now, I do think it's disgusting the way they treated the dogs. I am not saying it was right by any stretch of the imagination. However, I am taking the time. I am considering the time frame that we're talking about here. And what I realize is that people didn't know better because we didn't have the amenities we have today. We didn't have a stove. We didn't have a microwave. And so doing these things by hand was very difficult, which is why we started, using animals to help us push plows on farms, so on and so forth. Any way that we can exploit labor and make it easier is at least what it seemed like we were doing back in the day, which may look bad to us, but they didn't know any better back then. That was just a way of life. So anyway, I digress. There was progression to be made. Whether or not it was moral, I don't think it was, but it was a step up. And so eventually what happened is that another innovation took place. A steam-powered machine came along and ended up replacing the need for a Turnspit dog. And unfortunately, that Turnspit dog shortly went extinct thereafter. But as we see here, there are 3 steps that occurred. There was child labor, having to turn the meat over the fire. Then there was a dog, so then we started using animal labor to replace the need for a child doing that tasking work. And then we had a steam-powered machine come along and make it so the animals didn't have to do the work anymore, and our children and people didn't have to do the work anymore. So as we see throughout history, things progressively get better. Now, if we think about it today, we go, man, they used just a steam-powered machine. They used animals. They used children to do this kind of hard work. And all we have to do is push a couple buttons on the microwave, or open up the oven, push a couple buttons, or turn on the stove, which has fire right underneath it, and then you can cook your food from the luxury of your home without any tasking labor. So that's just the progression of innovation right there is what we see. Unfortunately, it's a pretty gruesome example, but it shows that in so many ways we have improved. And just in one simple way that I'm sure we all take for granted is the luxurious cooking amenities that we possess today compared to our ancestors not too long ago in the grand scheme of things. Only, 400 years ago? 400 years ago. In the grand scheme of things, that is just a sliver in time, and we've made huge improvements since then. So that's the article I wanted to cover for today. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And like always, if you like what you hear or saw, please leave a comment, subscribe, and on the Apple podcast, please rate and review. And if you guys have any suggestions on a topic you would like me to cover that there's been improvement throughout time and it has been consistent, please let me know. And I would love to cover it. All right, you guys have a great day. Goodbye.